Hi, my name is Ed Castro. I'm the president of Journey for Justice, California Journey for Justice. I'd like to just introduce the rest of the board. Right, on my right is Linda Whitlow, the vice president. On my left is Amy Martinez, our treasurer. And if I forgot your last name, Harry Phillips, he is a parliamentarian, and the one that's operating the operating the equipment is Jason Flores, and he's our secretary. The next thing will be that we'll do the Cesar Chavez worker prayer.
Could I have everybody stand, please? Prayer of the farm worker's struggle. Show me the suffering of the most miserable, so I will know my people's plight. Free me to pray for others, for you are present in every person. Help me to take responsibility of my own life, so that I can be free at last. Grant me courage to serve others, for in service there is true life. Give me honesty and patience, so that I can work with other workers. Bring forth song and celebration, so that the Spirit will alive among us. Let the Spirit flourish and grow, so we will never tire of the struggle. Let us remember those who have died for justice, for they have given us life. Help us love even those who hate us, so we can change the world. Written by Cesar E. Chavez, UFW founder, 1927 to 1993. Amy?
Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and read in Spanish. If I botched a little, I'm sorry. Oración del campesino en la lucha. Enséñame el sufrimiento de los más desafortunados. Así conoceré el dolor de mi pueblo. Líbrame a orar por los demás, porque estás presente en cada persona. Ayúdame a tomar responsabilidad de mi propia vida. Solo así seré libre al fin. Concédeme valentía para servir al prójimo, porque en la entrega hay vida verdadera. Concédeme honradez y paciencia, para que yo pueda trabajar junto con otros trabajadores. Alúmbranos con el canto y la celebración, para que levanten el espíritu entre todos. Que el espíritu florezca y crezca, para que no nos cansemos entre la lucha. Nos acordamos de los que han caído por la justicia, porque a nosotros han entregado la vida. Ayúdanos a amar aún a los que nos odian, así podremos cambiar el mundo. Escrito por César E. Chávez, fundador de la UFW.
Thank you, Linda and Amy, for reading the prayer. Now I want to talk a little bit briefly about the Journey for Justice. We started getting together about 2004 with a church out of San Jose. The speakers is going to be here a little later to talk about that. The idea that we got because it was based because of all the poverty that we're seeing in the Central Valley, a study that was done by a couple of congressmen, one I think was Cardoza from this area, it was from Jim Costner area. And talking about that, I don't know if you've seen the latest census in the newspaper, which says that Fresno County has the highest poverty in the valley. And then next follows a few. And Merced's 24, but that's still pretty high. It's 23.7% for Merced, which is pretty high for poverty. So we started in 2004. We started doing activities about 2006. And what we decided to do was something similar to what Cesar Chavez did in 1964 when he did the walks to Sacramento. We just didn't have the time to walk, so what we decided to do, we did a car caravan from city to cities. I can't remember the first year. I think we started in either Reedley or someplace out in Lindsay. Went over to Sacramento. And we've done a few other activities. We actually did a forum on prison rights. I wanted to mention briefly that thing about community. I think it's an important thing. I was watching a program the other day, and it reminded me of what's happening with Occupy. We're the 99%, but the 1% is controlling the banks. They're allowing us to lose our homes and other things that they're doing. So as a community, we need to start working together and getting back the power that I think belongs to us, because as human beings, we have the right to live in a democratic society. I also wanted to mention briefly that we have a website and a brochure here. And it's in the brochure. Just look at the brochure, and it talks about our website and our Facebook. And our meeting dates are usually the odd Fridays of the month, of each month. Well, the next one I think is going to be on January 6th at 6:30 in the music room, and it's going to be here in this, not in this building, it's going to be in the music room next door. Now briefly I want to talk about Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I believe it is a human right that all people should have in this planet, have a human right. And this particular Declaration of Rights was proposed in October of 1945, and there were several countries involved in it. One was the U.S., France, Soviet Union, England, and I forget the other country. But it appears to me that, I'm not sure, the only country that's never signed off is the U.S., so that shows you where the U.S. is at this moment concerning human rights and the rights of the citizens here to get involved in a democratic society. Today we're going to be honoring Article 25, which has to do with the right of a person to have adequate living, whether it be health care, housing, etc. Now, I also want to thank the Occupy Merced people that are here, because they represent the 99%, like I was saying, so do we. The 99% are being controlled right now at this moment by the 1%, and I think it's important we keep that in mind. We can only do so much. I think we should start with the community locally, and then we can try to expand as we grow and get more organized and have more power. The next thing I think we'll be doing is we're showing this film clips. The first one on the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights.
That's a good question. Human rights. That's a good question. Human rights.
To them a couple of weeks ago, so we're in the process of putting that out right now. The lights on? Okay. Next on our program is a person from Los Angeles. He's a spoken word artist and a poet. His name is Merced. You can come forward.
Thank you. The name of this poem is Declaration of Economic Human Rights. Jonathan, a latchkey kid out of Detroit, Michigan. Jonathan, a latchkey kid out of Detroit, Michigan. Lives with his auntie and his mom's. Been a month since he's seen her. 2 months since she's been home. Used to live with grandma. Till at night he could see her breath, see his breath. Found her dead in that Detroit cold. All over an unpaid gas bill. Opens a letter addressed to his mother. School asking for donations for basic necessities, toiletries. Turns on the news, thinks they got money for war, but not for toilet paper. His city, Detroit, once had the nation's highest income per capita. But now, take a drive around town, and it's hard to believe you're still in America. Fresno, California. Consuela, in a motel with 4 children, men pass in and out of these rooms, in and out of her life. She has learned to depend on no one. Over the past 3 years, she assumed several identities, as she's been twice prosecuted, nearly deported for stealing a handful of fruits, dodges immigration and hotel clerks. There are days she goes without work. There are nights neither she nor her children eat there. They spend some nights in shelters not much safer than that cold, dark concrete. There is wealth in the soil. There are tents growing in the street that she swears she will do anything to protect her little girls from. But what promises can she really keep when she can't even afford a trip back to Oaxaca? Welcome to America. Taylor, Harlan County, Kentucky. Lives in a house of 15 that every month stretches 2 paychecks, some food stamps, Oxycontin, and a couple liters of Mountain Dew across the table of uncles, aunts, nieces, nephews, cousins, their fiancés, his wife, his children. It's been a month and a half since he made that 9-mile walk to the unemployment office. He has given 4 fingers, 17, and what feels like every morning when he wakes, half alone to these mountains. Sometimes in the Kentucky sky, out in Appalachia, it's hard to believe this is really America. Los Angeles, California. Melanie, the only child of Cambodian immigrants who came with nothing, who raised her to believe that this country you could achieve anything if you worked hard enough, that some of the American poor were just stupid and lazy, didn't take advantage of given opportunity. First year out of university, she was making $40,000, the next 45, the next 50. Remember the lessons from business school, trying to make herself recession-proof every day in every way, trying to prove that she was adding value. But added value is what they don't pay you until you can be outsourced. For 8 months, Melanie slept on her savings, then on the couches of friends, then in her car, until finally returning home. There are days when the shame brings thoughts of suicide, having failed at America. We need a new value system. A new set of truths already proved to be self-evident. A declaration of economic human rights, the right to food, the right to shelter, the right to clothing, the right to clean water, the right not to live in the shadows or the crevices of the night. A declaration of economic human rights to be taken to a court higher than the Ninth Circuit, higher than the Supreme Court of Justice, to the court of what you already know in your heart to be true, that poverty should not be a death sentence. That a system that has money for bailouts, for the bailout of banks, but nothing for the mouths of hungry children is not one worthy of allegiance. That everyone, yes everyone, despite where they live, despite where they were born, despite where they come from, has a right to what they need. Yes, even here, even in America. Somewhere in America, a poor kid from the Midwest with stars in his eyes decides to heed the call of patriotism, serve his country, do his part to win the war on terrorism, run up on global jihad, the great big cry of, "Yeehaw!" and see who's left standing. So he trains and he prepares. And he prepares and he trains, but when he gets there, he finds automatic rifles taking aim at the innocent. Most often, old men, women, and children. And he stares in their eyes, those eyes so alive, full of terror. And he begins to wonder, what exactly makes one a terrorist? But his training taught it's us or it's them, so what then? Comes home on leave, sees the town one last time with family and friends, goes back to his mother's house, room just like he left it. In his uniform, he gets decked out, shines his medals, takes his pistol into his mouth, prepares for the blast, and awaits the silence somewhere in America, on the East Coast, or the West Coast, or anywhere with black or brown folks have a ghetto, or boy, he never really bought the American dream, but he scopes out his prospects, and he lives in the projects. He wouldn't mind being the first in his family to attend college with his Marines. From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, what a great big world to see, with so many interesting and diverse people to meet and possibly have to kill. He gets wounded badly, worthless to the war effort, comes back home, worthless to the workforce, half alive and half dead, and not just in the body but in the head, and he can't keep his mind right long to fight for the right to promise him. Sometimes he remembers he enlisted to get his mom out of roach-infested tenements. These days, he'd be happy enough just to get back in them, see him hobble down the street sometime around midnight. Just another homeless veteran up here in America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, a first world democracy, the first world, the free world. We hear in the first world that we have freedom. In the third world, they have free trade zones where first world corporations can exploit the labor of children. True enough, but take a good hard look at the real face of American poverty. See the place those factories used to be. Gary, Indiana, Philadelphia, Detroit, Youngstown, then see luxury mansions. The division of wealth in the United States of America is sharper than it is in Rwanda. That is not poetic license, that is statistical fact. Go to Fifth Street, downtown Los Angeles, see Skid Row, and then see the Mellon Bank, and you tell me where's the justice? We talk about third world countries? Well, then what exactly is this? We have more empty housing units than homeless up here in America. Where's the crime to take shelter from the cold? Where the truly destitute have to choose between surviving the night and breaking the law? Where empty apartment buildings are under armed guard here in America? Where is the crime for many to survive the law? Somewhere in America, Grandpa is sick. And you're hoping the doctors do the best they can for him. Well, you really should have planned for this. You should work harder, or maybe work smarter, so you can go to Harvard. Maybe then you'd be a real scholar. Maybe then you could afford the best that modern medicine has to offer, but you didn't. But don't worry, Medicaid will cover the cost of a hospital bed. And a handful of meds to keep him still through the night. Oh, you want him to help? Actually try to keep him alive? Boy, you must have stars in your eyes. This is America. We don't do that here. I'm Merced. I have some books for sale if you guys are interested. I am a traveling poet, two-time National Slam poet, Grand Slam champion of LA. KKK like 9 times, in the LA Times, lots of other stuff, so to convince you by my book.
Thank you, man, for those great words, you know. We're in the 99%, and there's no equal justice at this time. We're getting affected by all that stuff that's happening. We have to fight that back against the 1%. I just want to make a few announcements. We're selling tickets for the raffle that's coming up. I want to thank the donors, Umar Vega, if I mispronounce your name, let me know. And Torres and Sal and Gloria Sandoval. We also have a literature table there. Want to get information about our organization, the main organization. And briefly, I'm going to have Jesse Ornelas from the National Office of the Brown Parade to talk about their toy drive.
Good evening, everybody. How about Matt? That was great, right? Excuse my voice. We're at the parade today. We're marching on in cadence and the voice. You know, the Brown Parade, the Merced of the Brown Berets, we're having a toy and food drive, you know, for some needy families here in Merced. What we're asking for is, you know, the people's help. You know, people's help to help other people. You know, the simple toys, gift cards, canned goods, anything will help. You know, right now things are tough, and a lot more families in need. So if anybody is interested in giving, just see me at the break. I'll be back there. You can see anybody else here. You know, they're willing to trade your information, contact information. Again, you know, anything will help. So anything that you guys are willing to give would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We want to talk briefly about the membership drive. I just want to make a pitch. I'm going to have Randy Martinez, our treasurer, talk about it. And, you know, really for Chelsea, been around for quite a long time, and we think we're doing good work, and we want to get more people involved. As I briefly said earlier, community is really important, and we all have to work together in trying to beat the 1%.
So I just wanted to mention that we do have membership forms available and extend the invitation for you guys to become members of Journey for Justice. We would love to have more people involved, diversity, different people have different things that they're passionate about, and maybe there's something that you really want to take on, something that's really important to you in the community that you feel needs to get done, and maybe we're not addressing that, and that's because we may not have as diverse a population in Journey for Justice as there is here tonight. So I invite you, we have forums over there. If you're interested, please pick one up, you know, take a look at it, think on it if you need to, but we would be more than happy to have you. And that way we can put on more amazing events like this and do more in the community, more people, power in numbers. So thank you.
Also, I want to mention that the ones who came in late, if you didn't get a little ticket when you signed up, when you register, please go over there and get a ticket so you get a door prize. That's our door prize. Thank you.
And also, I was going to mention that we're doing a raffle, and we're selling the raffle tickets for $10. We're going to be having prizes. So we're just using that money for fundraising, so just to do events like this and action, so we can do more stuff in the community, addressing more concerns of the community. So if you go back there, you guys can go ahead and get tickets for our raffle. We'll be doing a raffle. We got some prizes. We got a computer that we're going to be a computer system that we're going to be raffling off. So if you don't have a computer system, that's your opportunity right there. We also got a frame that we're going to be giving away. It's a custom frame that one of our members gave to us. And there's a story behind that. You know, with he shared a story about police brutality, about his son being shot by a police officer, and him trying to go to the justice system to get justice and things successful. So he helped donate a frame to the Journey for Justice so we could raffle off. And usually his frames go from anywhere from $200 to $1,500. So we're custom. Once again, just we're using this money to help out the journey so we can do more events like this. And also we got a box of Seeds Candy. We got one of our shirts, a Journey for Justice shirt. And we're also giving away a $35 gift certificate for a haircut. We need a haircut. There's an opportunity right there. So, and once again, the money is just for Journey for Justice, just to help us out, to make us stronger, so we can have more money to do events like this. Because everything costs money, getting calls, and with food and everything. So just for that cost. So we would really appreciate if you somehow fundraise, and we're giving to you, and you're also giving back by winning the prize. So we would appreciate that.
Next on the program, I'd like to present one of our speakers who came from San Jose. He's a gentleman whose church, it's called Sham, came up with the original idea for us to do these caravans. His actual title, he told me, was Outreach Minister, but I think he's got a lot of hats that he wears. So I'd like to present Sandy Terry, who comes from San Jose.
I'm going to try this and see if it works. Does it work? You hear me? Okay, thank you. I'm going to try something. Have you guys had one of those Occupy things out here in Merced? Believe it or not, we had one in San Jose. San Jose is kind of like a backwater when it comes to politics. It's not like Oakland or San Francisco. We don't have a port to shut down or anything like that. But we did have a little Occupy that's set up in front of our city hall. And of course it got shut down when all the rest of them got shut down. But I did learn a few things. Did you learn this thing called mic check?
Mic check.
Mic check?
Mic check.
Okay, how about this one? Banks got bailed out.
We got sold out.
Banks got bailed out.
We got sold out.
Banks got bailed out.
We got sold out.
We are
The 99%.
We are
The 99%.
We are
The 99%.
All right. Sounds like you guys are doing great out here. Anyway, as he said, I'm an outreach minister. Do you guys mind if I start with just a little bit of prayer? Not too much? Anyway, I just want to thank you, Lord, for bringing us all here together, bringing us here safely. And dear Lord, help us to learn today in this Human Rights Day. Help us to learn the clarity and the courage to do your will in this world and to fight for a better world for all of us. Amen. And we're here to celebrate Human Rights Day, 63rd anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And one thing that the rulers of this country never admit is that the whole idea of human rights started right here in America. Now, we've always had problems living up to them, but they started right here with Thomas Paine, who's one of my heroes, who wrote a book called Common Sense, which instigated the American Revolution and started the revolution. And the American Revolution instigated the French Revolution, where they wrote something called the Declaration of the Rights of Man. And that's kind of like old-fashioned talk for human rights. And that was the first Declaration of Human Rights that was ever adopted. And so all of that idea came from here. And America started that whole worldwide revolution that began in 1776 and went all over the globe. And they don't teach us that here. In fact, of all the countries, when you hear about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the country that's the most ignorant of the human rights that are in that is right here. It's the United States of America, even though this is where it started. the right to housing. Our ministry is called Sham Deliverance Ministry, and I actually hooked up with them in 1991 when I met the person who became our pastor, Pastor Scott Wagers, and he was taking sociology students from San Jose State University down under the bridges in San Jose, where we had a lot of homeless people that lived. And he began to talk to people and bring people out to speak up at the university. And then he started bringing them down to City Hall to speak to the political leaders. And then he started setting up tents. We actually, in 1992, we occupied San Jose City Hall by setting up tents for homeless people in front of it because there was no place for them to go. They closed down the Armory shelter, the cold weather shelter for the winter, and dumped 400 people in the street with no place to go because it's illegal to sleep outside in San Jose. And so we set them up in front of, set up tents in front of City Hall, and all got ourselves arrested. So some things haven't changed too much over the last 20 years. But we set out to organize and educate homeless people to participate in fighting for a just society. We did demonstrations, marches, we occupied City Hall, we occupied church parking lots, and finally we occupied a whole church for about 12 years where we had homeless families living there. We got to know the people out here in the Central Valley, Ed and Linda, and the Journey for Justice people, and some of our members participated in the early Journeys for Justice when we came from Reedley up through to Sacramento. The foundation of our whole movement was the idea that housing is a human right. If people don't understand that it's a human right, they're not going to fight for it. If people don't see something as a human right, they're not going to fight for it. There's a famous saying that Harriet Tubman said during the movement against slavery. She said she freed 2,000 slaves, but she said she could have freed 2,000 more if only they understood that they were slaves. And we have the same problem in America today. We don't understand that our rights are being violated. We don't even know what our rights are because documents like the Declaration of Human Rights have not been publicized. There's two approaches to the housing problem. One is that it is a right and we fight for it as a matter of justice, or two, it's not a right and we beg for it as a matter of charity. And that's the approach that all the official 10-year plans all around the country are doing. We've been begging for 30 years for housing for the homeless, and it keeps getting worse. In our city, in San Jose, California, we adopted a 10-year plan in 2005. It's 2011 now, 6 years later, and we got more homeless than when we adopted the plan. We need to, this is any country with the resources must ensure the right to housing. This is what Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says. And does anybody doubt that we have the resources in this country? No. In our county, Santa Clara County, California, the Silicon Valley 150, the top 150 corporations in one county in California, can anybody guess how much money they made in profits last year? Anybody got any idea? Well, not quite trillions, no. $84 billion with a B. $84 billion. That's 3 times the size of our state budget deficit, which they're always saying there's nothing they can do anything about it. 3 times the size of that come from the profits in the corporations in just one county in our state. So there's no doubt that we have the resources. And this is the beginning of understanding how to fight for housing. But we also have to admit that we who believe in the human right to housing have been fighting for the last 30 years. We haven't been very successful either, and things continue to get worse. So we have to look a little bit deeper into the situation. We need to understand the cause of the problem in order to solve it. Henry Thoreau one time wrote that there's 1,000 people who are hitting at the branches of evil for every one that strikes at the root. So we need to learn how to understand a problem and strike at the root of it. The fundamental, the deep down economic cause of homelessness in our society is changes in the economy. There's been a revolutionary transformation in our economy over the last 40 years or so, from the industrial economy that we saw in the 19th and early 20th century to the electronics-based economy that we have had since the late 20th and into the 21st century. There's been a gradual, inexorable replacement of human labor by automation. And you can see this in the auto industry, where we have fewer people employed in making automobiles in this country since any time since about the 1920s, but we're producing more autos than we ever did before. You can see it in the ATMs, the self-service, self-checkout, and I understand they're even starting to automate McDonald's, where you put a card into some kind of a machine and your meal comes back to you. So, and there's been some projections that we're going to lose up to 50 million jobs in the next couple of decades. So when businesses need workers, they have a different attitude toward us. If unemployment is temporary or cyclical, they'll help us through it with unemployment insurance, welfare, housing assistance. But if unemployment is permanent and it's structural, they just have no use for us. And they gradually eliminate unemployment insurance. They gradually eliminate welfare. They're gradually eliminating health care. They're talking about eliminating Social Security. They're destroying our education and every other necessity of life, which is listed in Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. If you look at the difference between today and the 1930s, in the 1930s, Roosevelt overnight created about 8 million jobs. And they call it the Works Progress Administration. They had a bunch of different names for the programs, but 8 million people were put to work. Now, are we trying to say that we're poorer now than we were in the middle of the 1930s? That we can't do that kind of thing today? We're not doing it. And in fact, the government is presiding over the destruction of our state and local governments, the increase of unemployment, and just continuing downgrading of our quality of life. A lot of this replacement of workers with automation began in the 1970s when they introduced the computer chip into production. And it's no accident that homelessness, as we know it, modern homelessness in the United States, began in the early 1980s. The HUD budget in 1978 was $84 billion in constant dollars. 5 years later, in 1983, it was down to $18 billion. So when they withdrew that much subsidized housing from the market, the rents went through the roof, and of course at the same time, we went through a severe recession, and for the first time since the 30s, all of a sudden we had homelessness everywhere around us in every major city in America. So the situation that we find ourselves in now, we have 14 million unemployed, we have what's called a jobless recovery, and there's nobody's even talking about a return to full employment. So in this kind of a situation, we need to figure out a new way to distribute the wealth of society. It doesn't work to ask somebody to go to work, to earn the money, to pay for the necessities of life the way we used to, the way older people like myself grew up in that type of a society. It doesn't work to do that anymore because the jobs are just not there, and they're not creating any new jobs. So we have to find a way to circulate these necessities. We need some kind of a cooperative society where the abundance that we create today is distributed on the basis of need, not on how much money we may or may not have. Because more and more of us have no money at all. The problem is when you begin to advocate this kind of a society, a cooperative society, a society based on human needs and human rights, you begin to get accused of being a communist, and that we go through this huge legacy of McCarthyism, which we have in America, which says every time we stand up for somebody else besides ourselves, that makes us a communist or a socialist. The situation today is very different, and because back in the era of McCarthyism, communism was a political, ideological movement based on a political system. That system with the Cold War is no longer around. Now what we're talking about is a cooperative economy, and so the communism that any of us might talk about today is in the sense of an economic term. And in fact, as a Christian minister, if you go into the Bible and read the book of Acts, chapter 2, this is how the early Christians organized themselves. They brought their wealth to the community and distributed it equally to everyone. And in fact, it even says in the Bible that there was no poverty in their society. And I think this is the only way that we can provide what people need in today's society. It's the only way to provide jobs, housing, healthcare, and education. There's no other way to provide it. And the current way that our society is trying to do that, it's not working. It's broken. So what do? The important thing is to remain active, to remain fighting, to fight these occupations. The other thing that we're doing is on December 6th, I think many of you may be aware there was a national day to fight foreclosures that was declared by Occupy Wall Street. I know in our area, Occupy San Jose hooked up with a group in Redwood City called ACE, which I don't know if you have that out here. It's a statewide group. And we marched into Chase Bank, singing some of those chants which I led earlier. We got about 20 of us inside before the security guards could figure out what was going on. And we actually, we went there with a woman, 72-year-old woman, who was being evicted from her home. It was supposed to go up for sale on December 14th. And we went in there, and they put up these orange signs saying, "Bank closed due to temporary emergency," and we were inside, and they said they couldn't help her, but they got her on the phone to some of the executives, and after an hour and a half, she got the auction of her home postponed at least 2 months until February, and she got a promise of a face-to-face meeting later in the week with someone who could give her the loan modification, which she'd been trying to get for almost 2 years before then. So those type of actions, we need to participate in them, but we also need to educate people because we have to unite. It's not enough to have isolated actions. We have to begin to come together across color lines, across lines of occupation, across all of our different issues, and come together. The 99% that people talk about really come together, and anybody who's been involved in Occupy know that that's not easy. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to do. But that's the step that we need to take to begin to fight politically for our human rights. Thank you very much.
Sandy, before he misses himself, about anything we brought up?
Use the mic.
Can you repeat what you said?
Oh, any questions?
Does anybody have any questions
Oh.
from our speaker, Sandy Perry?
Yeah, if, coming from San Jose, wondering in particular what the occupier there is doing now that they've been evicted. If you have any updates on that?
Well, last night we visited 6 banks, and we did the same routine that I was talking about in San Jose, in Redwood City, where you kind of sneak in the back door, or you get a group and get in, sang Christmas carols, and you know, that whole banks got bailed out, we got sold out, you know, that's, I mean, we're very much alive. It's just, it's between the weather and the repression by the police, because that's what it is. Anybody who's studied what happened with the Occupy knows that it was all orchestrated by Homeland Security. Because basically, face it, they're getting ready to do another bank bailout right now while we speak. As soon as Europe goes down, which everybody says it's going to do, Wall Street is heavily invested in Europe. They're a very short period of time, they're going to be coming back to the government with their palms out, looking for more of our money. So that's why they're trying to disperse this Occupy Wall Street movement as fast as they can. But here's the deal. We still got 14 million people unemployed. We still have no education, and our tuition's going through the roof. We still have 50 million people without health care. We still have 50 million people in poverty. So, you know, we're not going away. They're not solving any problems. So, you know, this Occupy stuff is going to keep bubbling up. I mean, they're going to be, if they try to stop it, have you ever seen that whack-a-mole thing? They hit it down here, pops up over here. They hit it here, it's going to pop up over here. You know, this thing, it's started and it can't be stopped. So we're still together in a kind of a disconnected way. We're trying to find new places to set up tents and all that kind of thing.
You mentioned you're in 6 years into a 10-year plan to address homelessness in San Jose, and it's not working. I think that we've just started our own plan here. What are our next steps if that's not the solution? It posited itself as being.
Well, the problem with the 10-year plans is that they say if you just go along with whatever the government tells you to do, the government will take care of it. And the nonprofit sector, which is a lot of it is funded by the government. And what they're basically telling you to do is to do nothing, to continue treating homelessness as an issue of charity. Don't complain because these corporations are making $84 billion while we have homeless people in our streets. It just will not work. What we have to do is get out there and protest. And we need to educate people that, about the injustices. This is an injustice. This is not homelessness is not a question of charity. This is not a question of feeling sorry for people. Those people are us. And we're probably going to be those people in another couple of years if things keep going the way they are. So it's not a question of charity. This is justice. The richest country in the world has people. Did you see those pictures of Fresno? That stuff is shocking. I went to Fresno on Journey for Justice, and I've never been the same since I went there. That's the homelessness there, and I'm sure they destroyed all those camps, and the camps have cropped up someplace else because people have no place to go. So the 10-year plans are not an answer. The answer has to be people getting together and organizing politically.